Think about your phone for a second today. You pick it up and dial a number. You assume that your conversation is completely private. You trust the system to protect your words. But here is a terrifying piece of history. For decades, that privacy was just an illusion. Until 1968, America had no federal wiretapping laws. The federal government could listen to absolutely anyone. They did not even need a legal warrant. Was the FBI secretly recording your own grandparents? The answer is much darker than you think. It is a story about unchecked federal power. It involves bootleggers, presidents, and deep political paranoia. Let me take you back to the beginning. We must go back to the early 1900s. The telephone was a magical new human invention. It connected people across massive physical distances instantly, but it also created a brand new vulnerability. Before the phone, secrets were whispered in person, or they were written down in sealed letters. The government could not easily intercept those words. But copper wires changed the game for everyone. Your voice was now traveling outside your home. It moved through public spaces on physical lines. Anyone with basic tools could tap into them. And the police quickly realized this massive advantage. In the 1920s, America entered the Prohibition era. Alcohol was illegal, but the public demand was huge. Criminal syndicates built massive empires selling illegal booze. Bootleggers used the telephone to run their operations. They coordinated shipments and paid off corrupt cops. Law enforcement was desperate to catch these mobsters. So, they started climbing up telephone poles quietly. Agents would physically splice into the copper wires. They put on headphones and just sat listening. They heard every single deal, bribe, and secret plan. It was a crude but incredibly effective tactic. But there was one massive glaring legal problem. There were absolutely no laws regulating this practice. The Constitution protected citizens from unreasonable physical searches. The Fourth Amendment protected your actual physical house. But it said nothing about your invisible conversations. The Founding Fathers could not predict the telephone, so the cops operated in a legal gray area. They listened to criminals without any judge's approval. They did whatever they wanted with zero oversight. And this led to a massive Supreme Court case. It involved a massive bootlegger named Roy Olmsted. Roy was running a massive illegal alcohol empire. Federal agents tapped his phone lines for months. They gathered enough evidence to put him away. But Olmsted fought back in the federal courts. He claimed his constitutional rights were brutally violated. He said they searched his words without any warrants. This case reached the Supreme Court in 1928, and the court's decision shocked the entire nation. They ruled that wiretapping was completely legal everywhere. Why? Because the agents never entered his actual house. They only tapped the wires out on the street. There was no physical trespassing on his property. So, the Fourth Amendment did not apply here. This ruling opened a terrifying new surveillance door. The government now had a blank legal check. They could listen to anyone at any time. And one man saw the ultimate power here. His name was FBI Director John Edgar Hoover. He was about to build an invisible empire. He would use stolen secrets to control the country. Information was about to become the ultimate political weapon. The Supreme Court decision changed American history forever. Chief Justice Taft delivered the shocking final ruling. He said the Fourth Amendment protected physical things. It protected your actual material house and papers. But telephone wires extended far out into public. The police never physically broke into Olmsted's house. They just tapped the wires down the street. Therefore, the government did not steal physical property. Your whispered words were not considered protected things. This logic sounds completely insane to us today. But in 1928, the court thought it was brilliant. They gave the police a massive legal loophole. However, not every judge agreed with this ruling. Justice Louis Brandeis wrote a furious dissenting opinion. His warning still echoes through our modern world. Brandeis saw the dark future of government surveillance. He argued that technology would only keep advancing. Soon, the government could watch your every move. He said privacy was the most comprehensive right. It is the right most valued by civilized men. If the government breaks the law, chaos follows. The government teaches the people by its example. If the government becomes a lawbreaker, it breeds contempt. Brandeis knew wiretapping was a massive, dangerous weapon. It allowed the state to spy on everyone. It was far worse than physically searching a desk. A desk only holds a few private papers, but a phone tap captures your entire private life. It captures the secrets of everyone you call. Innocent people get caught in the surveillance net. But the Supreme Court ignored his chilling warning. They handed the federal government the ultimate power. And one specific agency took this power seriously. The Federal Bureau of Investigation watched this closely. At the time, the FBI was a small bureau, but a young man named Hoover was taking over. Director Edgar Hoover understood the true power of information. He realized wiretapping was his golden ticket up. He could gather dirt on his political enemies. No one could hide their dirty secrets from him. He quietly began building a massive surveillance machine. The Supreme Court just gave him the green light. There was absolutely no federal law to stop him. Congress completely failed to protect the American citizens. Politicians were too scared to pass any privacy laws. They knew Hoover was already listening to their calls. The Olmstead ruling created a dark, paranoid era. Law enforcement agencies across America bought wiretapping gear. Local cops started tapping phones in major cities. Private detectives used it to catch cheating spouses. Corporate spies used it to steal business secrets. The entire country was essentially bugged and recorded. But the FBI took it to a terrifying extreme. Hoover treated the law like his own personal toy. If the Supreme Court said it was technically legal, then Hoover would tap every phone he wanted. He built secret files on thousands of Americans. He used these files to blackmail powerful people. Even American presidents feared Hoover's massive secret files. The whispering wires became the FBI's best weapon. The illusion of privacy was completely stripped away, and the American public had absolutely no idea. They kept making calls, sharing their deepest secrets. They never knew the FBI was sitting right there. This surveillance state grew quietly in the shadows. It would take decades for the truth to emerge. The Olmstead ruling was a catastrophic judicial failure. It sacrificed civil liberties for a police advantage, and it set the stage for Hoover's dark reign. Edgar Hoover was a very dangerous man. He ran the FBI for nearly 50 years. Hoover knew that secrets were better than bullets. He used the telephone to build an empire. The Supreme Court had given him a gift. Wiretapping was legal, and Hoover took full advantage. He ordered his agents to tap thousands of lines. The FBI listened to politicians, actors, and writers. Hoover kept all these secrets in private cabinets. These were his famous, terrifying official secret files. If you had a dark secret, Hoover knew it. He recorded cheating spouses and hidden gambling debts. He tracked quiet meetings in dark hotel rooms. Nothing was safe from their hidden audio microphones. Hoover used this information as a brutal weapon. He blackmailed powerful people to keep his job. Why did no president ever fire this man? Presidents from Roosevelt to Kennedy actually feared him. Franklin Delano Roosevelt used Hoover for political gain. FDR let the FBI tap his political rivals. But this gave Hoover too much ultimate power. Hoover soon began spying on the presidents too. John Fitzgerald Kennedy had many dangerous, secret affairs. The FBI tapped the phones of his mistresses. Hoover walked into the Oval Office with transcripts. He showed Kennedy the brutal, typed-out evidence. It was a silent, terrifying threat to the president. Kennedy knew he could never fire the director. Hoover would just leak the scandals to newspapers. The President of America was completely trapped now. Hoover built an invisible government in Washington. He controlled politicians without winning a single election. Congress was too afraid to pass wiretapping laws. Senators knew the FBI was tapping their homes. If they fought Hoover, their careers would end. The FBI director operated completely above the law. He deployed agents to break into private offices. They planted hidden microphones inside bedroom walls. Wiretapping was no longer just about catching bootleggers. It was about controlling the entire American system. Hoover tapped the phones of famous Hollywood stars. He listened to Charlie Chaplin and Marilyn Monroe. He wanted to know their deep political beliefs. If you disagreed with him, you were ruined. Hoover used stolen audio to destroy human lives. He ruined careers with a single leaked rumor. America was supposed to be a free country, but freedom is a joke when someone listens. Hoover turned America into a quiet surveillance state. He operated his dark empire from the shadows. Nobody could stop this massive wave of spying. Federal agents tapped phones without asking any judge. They bypassed the courts and broke the rules. Law enforcement became a tool for personal revenge. Hoover remained untouchable for his entire long life. The whispering wires fed his massive, paranoid ego. This was the darkest era of federal overreach. Civil liberties were crushed by the FBI machine. The public lived in blissful, total ignorance today. They had no idea their calls were monitored. But the paranoia would soon reach dangerous levels. The Cold War was about to change everything. New enemies would give Hoover even more power. The surveillance net was about to expand rapidly. The FBI prepared for its most brutal mission. They were about to target the civil rights movement. The worst abuse of power was still coming. Hoover had a grand vision for his agency. He wanted total control over the American public. The telephone made this dark dream totally possible. Wiretapping gave him the keys to the kingdom. Privacy was now a luxury nobody truly had. The FBI director always listened in the dark. He knew your secrets better than you did. The world changed after the Second World War. America entered a terrifying new era of fear. The Cold War created massive panic and paranoia. Politicians saw communist spies hiding in every shadow. This fear gave the FBI massive new power. National security became the ultimate excuse for everything. Hoover told the public that danger was everywhere. He claimed that Soviet spies were stealing secrets. The government needed to watch the American people. Wiretapping was no longer just for stopping mobsters. Mass surveillance became a normal part of life. Federal agents monitored thousands of innocent private citizens. They tapped the phones of teachers and writers. Anyone who questioned the government was suddenly suspicious. You could be targeted just for protesting peacefully. The FBI operated completely outside of the law. They bypassed judges and ignored all basic rights. But their darkest operation targeted a true hero. The civil rights movement was growing very strong. Millions demanded equal rights across the entire nation. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. led this movement. Hoover viewed Dr. King as a massive threat. The FBI director absolutely hated the civil rights leader. He ordered agents to destroy King by any means. They placed hidden microphones in his hotel rooms. They tapped his home and office telephone lines. The FBI recorded every single private conversation he had. They listened to his late-night strategy meetings. They desperately searched for any dark personal secrets. The government weaponized this stolen audio against him. They compiled a highly edited and disturbing tape. The FBI mailed this audio tape to his house. They included an anonymous and deeply threatening letter. The letter told Dr. King to kill himself. This was the premier law enforcement agency acting illegally. They were blackmailing a peaceful American political leader. It was an absolute gross violation of basic privacy. The government was acting like a cruel criminal mob. They spent millions of tax dollars tracking innocent people. Hoover wanted to crush any form of political dissent. If you spoke up, your phone was quietly tapped. The Red Scare justified this massive abuse of power. People lived in constant fear of hidden government ears. You never knew who might be listening right now. It was a deeply paranoid time in American history. The FBI had completely lost its moral compass today. Law enforcement agencies were targeting their own helpless citizens. The illusion of freedom was shattering into tiny pieces. Americans realized the state was turning against them. Wiretapping was the invisible chain holding society down. Nobody felt safe in their own homes anymore. Every telephone call could be your tragic final mistake. The government agents sat in dark rooms with headphones. They laughed at the private pain of innocent citizens. The surveillance state had reached its absolute darkest hour. The FBI proved that unchecked power corrupts completely. This dark era exposed the true danger of wiretapping. Something had to change before the country was destroyed. The Supreme Court could not ignore this horror forever. The public would eventually demand their privacy back soon. The civil rights abuses shocked the conscience of America. People woke up to the terrifying reality of spying. They saw that anyone could become the next target. The push for a new privacy law slowly began. America was heading for a massive legal breaking point. The invisible empire of Hoover was about to crumble. The highest court was finally ready to step in. The breaking point finally arrived in the late 60s. The Supreme Court could no longer ignore the abuses. The turning point involved a very unlikely American hero. Charles Katz was a very well-known illegal bookie. He ran a massive illegal sports betting operation daily. He did not trust his own home telephone line. He knew the federal agents were probably listening closely, so he always used a public glass phone booth. He went into the booth and closed the door. He thought this glass box gave him total privacy. But the FBI agents were already one step ahead. They placed a hidden microphone outside the glass booth. They recorded all of his illegal gambling phone calls. Katz was arrested and convicted using these secret recordings. But Charles Katz decided to fight back in court. His case finally reached the Supreme Court in Washington. The year was 1967, and times changed. The justices looked at the old 1920s law. They realized the old physical trespass rule was wrong. They completely reversed the disastrous Olmsted Supreme Court decision. They made a massive historic ruling for civil rights. The court declared that the Constitution protects the people. It does not just protect physical places or buildings. When a person shuts the door of a booth, he expects his private conversation to remain completely private. This created the reasonable expectation of privacy legal rule. The federal government could no longer spy on everyone. This ruling forced Congress to finally take real action. They passed the historic Wiretap Act of 1968. This new law changed the American justice system forever. Federal agents could not just tap a phone anymore. They needed to get a strict warrant from judges. They had to prove a real crime was happening. The era of Hoover tapping anyone was officially over. Law enforcement was finally forced to follow strict rules. The invisible empire of the FBI took a hit. Citizens finally got some basic protection for their words. But the victory for total privacy was not perfect. The government always finds a new way to listen. The new laws had many hidden loopholes for spies. National security was still used as a major excuse. The battle between freedom and security was just starting. The 1968 law was a massive step. But it did not stop the surveillance state entirely. Charles Katz accidentally changed the entire American legal system. A random gambler gave us the right to privacy. It proves that history works in very strange ways. The FBI could no longer operate in complete darkness. They were forced to step into the legal light. The whispering wires were finally placed under judicial control. But the story of American surveillance does not end. Modern technology was about to make things much worse. The legacy of 1968 is very complicated. The new laws stopped the worst of the abuses. But the federal government never truly stops listening completely. They just find new and highly advanced legal loopholes. The digital age brought terrifying new tools for spies. Phones became smart, and our entire lives moved online. Then the tragedies of September 11th changed the world. Fear returned and the surveillance state expanded once again. The Patriot Act gave the government massive new powers. The National Security Agency began collecting our private data. They did not need to physically tap copper wires. They scooped up millions of digital messages every day. Edward Snowden leaked this terrifying reality to the public. He proved that the invisible empire is still alive. Technology has changed, but the ultimate power struggle remains. The government always wants to know your deepest secrets. They claim it is strictly for your own safety. But history shows how quickly that power becomes corrupt. We went from bootleggers to massive global digital surveillance. The whispering wires simply turned into invisible data streams. Your modern smartphone is the ultimate tracking device today. Hoover would have loved the technology we have now. He could track the entire world from his desk. Think about this before you make a private call. Just remember that total privacy might be an illusion. Someone might still be listening in the dark shadows. This hidden history changes how we view our privacy. Make sure to subscribe and like this video today. We expose the dark hidden systems that control society. See you in the next fascinating deep dive soon.